Have you ever wondered how you got pre-fired or how opponents knew where you were? Or maybe you want to know why the opponents always seem to rotate before you attack, or why you can't successfully repeek. Perhaps you just want to know how you can use your opponent's expectations against them. Fear not, variation is the solution to everything and the topic of this video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be the first to see more content designed to help you rank up just like this. Keep in mind that these tips did work for me, but you may need something different. That is up to your own judgment. Hello everyone, my name is CatchAll, and let's get started. To understand the value of variation, we first need to take a look at the alternative. If I were to list a string of numbers, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you could guess that the next number is 6. Why? Because it's a pattern. Patterns make it possible to predict the future based on what's been done in the past. If you do the same thing over and over, you become very predictable. Players who notice this can use it against you, especially by pre-countering whatever move you might be making. Variation is all about being unpredictable in order to not only prevent pre-countering, but also to give yourself the advantage of surprise. Let's move into our first question. So how are you getting pre-fired? Well, the opponent has either noticed that you are playing the same position, or has commonly played against players that do, and therefore pre-fires a certain spot. In this situation, you may want to simply change positions. You should be doing this anyways. However, you may be able to use the pre-fire against them by changing your location slightly so that the pre-fire misses, giving you the opportunity to land a shot on someone with a displaced crosshair and wasted first shot accuracy. This could mean crouching, holding an off angle, or using the pre-aim against them by peeking into their side so that they aren't directly facing you when they peek into your crosshair. How do opponents know where you are? Well, the likely answer is pretty similar. They notice that you play the same spot. Aside from pre-fires, playing the same spot makes it really easy for opponents to box you out with utility. Rather than gathering information first, they can rest assured that you play the same spot, and therefore can skip the usual preparation steps. In this case, you just want to make sure you switch positions frequently. I wouldn't recommend waiting for opponents to start shutting you down to change it, just do it routinely. By doing this, you'll also gain the advantage of opponents generally being less focused when they encounter you. I don't know about everyone else, but I pay a lot more attention and focus when I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to see opponents compared to when I'm just clearing angles. That's not an optimal habit, but it's a very common one, and it can make a big difference. Let's move on to why opponents may seem to always rotate before you attack. Maybe they're just getting lucky. On the other hand, they could be reading you easily if you only use one tempo. Tempo is basically the speed of your attack. If I notice a team always commits at around 30 seconds, or get the feeling that they always hit with the same tempo, I call rotates earlier than we would normally have enough information to do so. You can vary your tempo by either attacking at different timings, for example with 1 minute left versus 30 seconds left, or you can go by acceleration or feel if you find that works out better for you. Alternatively, some teams just rotate at seemingly random timings if they don't see anything on their side. If this follows a pattern, you can use it against them by faking one side and then hitting the other in relation to that timing. It's probably still beneficial to vary tempo while this happens. Another possible explanation is that you are not varying the depth of your attacks. Depth refers to the number of fakes a team makes before committing, where a direct attack is 1, one fake has a depth of 2, and so on. For example, if it is noticed that a team only makes 2 depth attacks, a potential counter strategy is to wait for the first fake and then move to the other side of the map so that all or almost all of the defense is there to greet the attackers. Varying the depth of your attacks will help prevent opponents from easily predicting the final destination of your efforts. Now for something a lot more mechanical. Why are you having trouble with repeeks? There are a lot of factors that could explain the scenario, but 2 of the more common ones are either always repeeking or always repeeking with the same timing and position. If you always repeek, it can be super easy to just pre-fire, especially since the agents look so different, and as a result, attributing a trait to a player and then identifying them later are both easier. Try mixing up repeaking with falling back and using utility. That way it's unclear whether or not a repeak will occur immediately. Even more common than this in my experience is repeaking with the same timing and position. This is something that is really noticeable over longer fights where a player will wait the exact same amount of time between repeaks and will always move out of cover roughly the same amount. This makes pre-firing them for a headshot super easy. Repeaking with different timings and positions, even slight differences can really improve the effectiveness of your repeaks. Let's move on to the final question in the intro list. How can you use your opponent's expectations against them? If we return to the same list of numbers we used earlier, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you could predict that the next number was 6. This was only correct because the next number I gave was 6. In theory, however, I could give you the exact same set, but then completely break the pattern and list a 12 after the 5 instead. What you can essentially do is convince your opponents to expect 6 and then give them 12. You can do this by feeding them a pattern, preferably one built off something you have done in previous rounds, but then break off the pattern to surprise them and hopefully catch them off guard for an easy frag or an easy round. You can do this with almost all of the variation we've talked about before. If you have been repeaking in the same timing and position, you could peek at the same time again, but wide and crouched, so that the opponent pre-fires too high and you get the opening you need to score an elimination. This way, not only is their crosshair misplaced, but they are also firing already and have wasted their first shot accuracy. You can also feed a pattern with strategy. One of my favorite openings is the 1-2-3 opening. First round is a rush, second round is a fake, and then the third round is either a double fake or a fake and then a double back. The rounds build off each other by feeding the pattern from the previous round, but then breaking it in order to misposition opponents. You can see how this works. Perhaps most importantly though, variation is a solution to a pattern of ineffectiveness. In this sense, it's something of a catch-all solution, and that's what inspired the title of this video. Most people would accept the logic that if something has been ineffective, it's probably time to try something else. Yes, what you are currently doing may work, but if the pattern stays the same, it may be unreasonable to expect a different result. Further, there are so many different possible approaches, and so many of these that are successful ones, that sticking to a single approach that isn't working probably isn't worth it. While this may make intuitive sense upon hearing it, that doesn't mean players actually do it unprompted in games. It's not their fault. The brain likes to automate things when it can, which is part of why patterns pop up so often in the first place, but this doesn't make it any less damaging to a player's success. The hard part of this tip isn't understanding the logic, but actually consciously choosing to do it. I would recommend literally keeping a notepad or something and just writing down when you make a switch to anything, any kind of variation. If you do this, it will help ensure that you get into a habit of being mentally flexible and incorporating variation into your games. In my experience, almost every very decisive loss occurs for one of two reasons. The team didn't change things up and therefore lost the same way 13 times, or the team didn't figure out a possible solution before the opposing team scored 13 times. Of these two, the first one is way more common, and I've probably had more comebacks than harsh defeats of the second kind. The point is, vary things up when they aren't working unless you have a good reason not to. In fact, I would take it one step farther and say vary things up before they don't work. I generally prefer to stay ahead of the curve whenever possible in the interest of staying ahead of opponents. But if you prefer to wait for something to fail before moving to the next thing, this is a perfectly reasonable approach, as long as you account for the likely round loss if or when opponents figure out how to beat what you are doing, and as long as you don't end up getting trapped trying to do the same thing because it used to work. Once again, I want to stress that it's not so much the logic of changing an ineffective approach that players have trouble with, it's actually implementing it. Once you do though, it can be the start of turning harsh losses into triumphant comebacks. Variation is awesome because it goes above and beyond. Not only does it offer the solution to a plethora of problems, but it also offers the advantages of unpredictability and pattern breaks. Perhaps even better, it's not super complicated to implement it into your skill set. Making a conscious decision to add variation into your gameplay can go a long way towards getting you much closer to becoming the Valorant player that you want to be. I hope you found some value in this video. Best of luck everyone, and I will see you next time.